Good morning. For those, let me introduce who's with me today. From my right, Robert Mejica, Budget Director for the State of New York. To my left, Melissa DeRosa, Secretary to the Governor. To Melissa's left, we're joined today by Major Chris West from the New York State Police. Last night was a long and ugly night all across this nation, as we know. Let's talk about where we are today with the COVID virus first. The number of hospitalizations are down again. The net change in hospitalizations down again. Intubations down again. Number of new deaths still dropping. All good news. Number of lives lost down to 56, which is, in this absurd reality we live in, actually very, very good news. There'll be a point at which the number of deaths can't get any lower because people will die of something, and COVID virus is very good at affecting those people who have other illnesses. But this reduction in the number of deaths is tremendous progress from where we were. And we have gone through hell and back, but we are on the other side. And it's a lesson for all of us. Last night, as I said, was an ugly night all across this nation. It was an ugly night across this state. We had a number of protests all across the state. New York City, cities upstate. We've seen a lot of disturbing video about the protests, and where I've asked the Attorney General to review the New York City protests and the actions and procedures that were used. I'm going to ask her to include in that review these demonstrations that are ongoing last night, if there are additional demonstrations tonight, and the Attorney General will be reviewing those actions. Upstate New York, we also had actions. We had a significant state police presence all across upstate New York. We have the National Guard on standby. We expect additional protests tonight, and we're preparing for such. Rochester, the county executive, and the mayor asked for additional state police for tonight, and we're going to have 200 additional state police. But look, the big issue is people are outraged, and I understand that. I'm outraged. It's not just George Floyd's killing, although that's enough to outrage a nation. It's George Floyd, it's Ahmaud Arbery, it's Breonna Taylor, all just in the past 3 months. It's 30 years of Rodney King and Amadou Diallo and Sean Bell and Abner Louima, and the same case in states all across this nation, where only the name changes, but the color stays the same. You then had the first press conference by prosecutors looking at the Minneapolis situation that frankly raised more questions than it answered. And the real issue is the continuing racism in this country. And it is chronic, and it is endemic, and it is institutional. And it speaks to a collective hypocrisy. We're very good in this country at telling other people how they should live their lives and how they should act, how we preach a high standard, but we still discriminate on the basis of color of skin. That is the simple, painful truth. But this is a moment for truth. Now, at the same time, it is equally true that violence never works. How many protests have we had? How many nights have we gone through like last night? How many times have we burned down our own businesses, our own neighborhoods, and our own communities? Burning down your own house never works and never makes sense. Burning down your own struggling businesses People who are trying to bring back the community never make sense. It dishonors Mr. Floyd's death. Mr. Floyd was not violent. Mr. Floyd was compliant. Mr. Floyd wasn't even charged or accused of a violent crime. There was no violence. That's what makes the killing more outrageous. When you are violent, it creates a scapegoat to shift the blame. It allows the President of the United States to tweet about looting rather than murder by a police officer. It allows the federal government to politicize what's going on and to come up with theories blaming the left and the extreme left, which only furthers the politics of division. Maya Angelou said, "Hate has caused a lot of problems in the world, but it has not solved one yet." The goal has to be affecting change. How do you use the energy to mobilize people to actually reform society and make things better? And don't tell me that we can't change, because we know we have and we can. Change comes in a moment when the stars line up. It's not easy, but when the stars line up and the people are ready to change, they can change. We have seen it happen in this state and in this nation. We created a new civil right in this nation for the LGBTQ community when we passed marriage equality. And we said we will no longer discriminate when it comes to marriage and telling people who they can love and who they can't love. After the Sandy Hook massacre, when people saw the madness of an assault weapon killing children, we passed common sense gun reform in this state after decades of trying. When we had record income inequality and people said this is enough and enough is enough, that's when we passed free college tuition. And we passed a minimum wage where people can actually live decently. People can change. And we have seen that lesson over the past 92 days as we've been dealing with this coronavirus. Who changed society to deal with this virus? The people did it. 50 days ago, on April 12th, we lost 800 people from COVID. Yesterday, we lost 56. 800 to 56. 60 days ago, we had 3,400 people come into our hospitals. Yesterday, we had 191. Who did that? Who made that remarkable change, that radical change? Who made all that progress? Government leaders? Government did it? No. Let's be honest. Most government leaders denied that COVID was a problem. Most didn't know what to do, and if they knew what to do, they didn't know how to do it. It wasn't government. It was we the people. We the people forced that change and did it in weeks, literally. So of course we can change. And our challenge today is to use this moment, use this energy constructively, and demand real positive change. And articulate what the change is that we want. Be specific. We know what must be done. We know what we can do. We know what should be done. And we know what should be done immediately. Demand that the federal government and every state government pass a law that says allegations of police abuse cannot be investigated by local prosecutors because self-policing does not work, period. Allegations must be investigated by an independent outside agency. Demand that we define excessive force by a police officer by one standard all across this nation so every American lives by the same standard. If a police officer is accused of wrongdoing and is being investigated, release their disciplinary records so people can see what the prior acts of that police officer was. Demand that every public school provide the same level of funding for a child so we don't have two education systems in this nation, one for the rich and one for the poor. There is no reason and no excuse today for any child to live in poverty. We know that. Demand that change. And if our government leaders won't do it, or can't do it, or don't know how to do it, then you vote them out. That's how you make change. Most Americans are good, fair-minded, decent, kind, loving individuals. We need to mobilize the best in our people rather than allowing the worst. But don't lose the passion. Don't lose the outrage. Be frustrated. But be smart and be directed and be constructive and destructive. Help your community. Don't hurt your community. Be a laser and focus on real positive change. That's how this moment becomes a different moment in the history books. That's how George Floyd's death does not become just another name in a long list of people who should have never died in the first place. George Floyd must not have died in vain. Mr. Floyd's killing must be a moment in which this nation actually learned and grew and progressed to make this place a better place. And we can do it if we are smart together. Langston Hughes told us the ultimate goal: make America the land that fulfills her promise of greatness for all Americans. That's what this is about. We can do that. We have shown what we can do. Use this moment, use this empowerment, use this mobilization, and use it for good. Use it for good, so that when we look back, we say, yes, this story was all too familiar in some ways. What happened to Mr. Floyd was all too familiar. But the outcome was different, and the outcome was historic, and it was actually a moment of positive change. That has to be our goal. All of us, from the angry young protesters on the street, frustrated, energized, lashing out, to government officials on both sides of the line, to the police officers, 99.9% of them who are good, hardworking people who are trying to help their community. It's a common goal. We just have to be smart enough to get there.